Hi guys, so I'm here today to do the second of my March book hauls. Here I'm going to be showing you the books that I have bought myself second hand recently and currently have out on loan from the library. So I've actually picked up a few books second hand recently. Been treating myself apparently, so we'll start with those, and the first one is one that you probably will not be surprised to see here. In fact, it's more surprising that it's taken me this long to pick up a copy, and that is The Dark Mirror, book 1 in the Bridie Chronicles by Juliet Marillier. So this is one of the few series, I think one of the 2 series by Juliet Marillier that I have not started yet. So she is one of my favourite authors of all time. She writes incredible fantasy books, often set in sort of like historical medieval settings, most commonly Ireland, but some of them are set elsewhere. And actually I'm not 100% sure, but I think this one's set in Ireland. I could be wrong, maybe that's just because I assume a lot of her books are set in the same sort of world. But like I said, there's 2 series by her I haven't started yet, and yes, I have started many series by her that I haven't yet finished, but that's not the point. It's good to have the first book in the series for when I want to get to it, because I always adore her writing, and this is like a big chunky book, so I know it's going to be a lot for me to get completely absorbed and wrapped up in, which is always my experience with her writing. The storyline itself I don't know tons about. I picked this book up because it's an author I know and love. So I'll just tell you what it says in the back. When Bridie is sent by his parents to live with the druid Brochan, he knows only that he has left his home and family to learn to be a warrior and scholar, strategist and sage. He is not aware that in the divided and war-torn kingdom of Fortru, a secret council of elders, including Brochan, have long been making plans for the future of their homeland, with Bridie himself central to their strategy. Dun dun dun. I think there's also another lead character, a female lead character, yes, called Tuala, who apparently grows from a fae child to beguiling young women, so she's perhaps a changeling, and I'm really excited. I'm hoping this is sort of dual narrative between those 2 characters. That's something she's done in her other series and I've really enjoyed, and I'm just really pleased to have this one on my bookcase. We then have another good old mass market fantasy paperback here that I know even less about, but the reason I picked this one up is because the author was recommended by a friend of mine, Rowan, who was actually talking about different series. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't pick up the series she recommended, but I think one of her favourite like fantasy series is by this author who's Melanie Ron, and I saw that she had this series, which the first book in is called Dragon Prince, so I could not resist starting here. I'm a sucker for dragons. Pretty sure the last video that went up on my channel was all about dragon books, so I thought, hey, you know, I've had a recommendation for this author, this book involves dragons, why not give it a shot? This one is about Prince Ahava, whose family have been custodians of the desert for as long as the sands spawned fire. But its true rulers were the dragons, majestic creatures seizing the kingdom's livestock at will and preying on the caravans that dared to cross their dominion. Zehava had pledged to hunt dragons to extinction, and his pledge had earned him his death. Now Rohan was prince of the kingdom, and his respect for the savage lords of the sky was based on more than fear. For his bride he had taken Sinead, one of the mysterious sunrunners whose magic wove power out of light. Together they would change the face of the desert forever, if their enemies did not destroy them first. So I think this might also have romance in it. I mean, I'm purely guessing that based on the front cover, but I'm excited to have a new like fantasy author to check out that comes highly recommended. So we'll see if this book works out for me. Whilst I mentioned romance though, I have a book that is 100% romance, and that is Suddenly You by Lisa Kleypas. I've actually already read this, so you can see my full review in my last reading wrap-up, which I'll link down below. But if you want a brief summary, this is a historical romance set in 19th century London, and we follow a well-born woman who is about to turn 30. She is actually quite well known as a novelist, but her romantic life leaves something to be desired, so she decides on her 30th birthday to hire herself a prostitute. And when this man turns up at her door, she assumes is the prostitute she hired, but it is not. It is actually a publisher, and she gets herself in a slightly embarrassing situation that piques his interest, and thus a romance develops from there on out. And like I said, I've read this, it was good fun. The pacing wasn't always spot on, it kind of felt a bit rushed at the end, but overall I enjoyed it, and I liked that the love interest and the main character worked in the book industry. I thought that was a fun touch. We then, lastly, for secondhand books, have a book that I know literally nothing about, but I saw secondhand and just could not resist this cover. It's The Charmed Sphere by Catherine Asaro. I think we already can tell this is a fantasy book. This is the kind of cover which I know some people hate, but instantly makes me think I'm going to enjoy the contents of a book. Like, it indicates to me something that strikes a chord with previous reading experience, and I'm just like here for it always. I know it can be a little over the top, but It tells me what I need to know, and therefore I pretty much love all these covers, and also pick them up on whims without really knowing that much about a book, which can sometimes end up being a mistake, but can also sometimes lead to wonderful discoveries. So this is one of those where I didn't know anything about it, I only know what the back says, which is, once Chime had been the most promising mage in the land, feted and celebrated for her potential and future role in the kingdom. Then Iris, her young competitor, made a stunning leap in skill and turned Chime's world upside down. Now no longer the most powerful, no longer promised a prince, and still unable to harness her magic properly, Chime was set adrift, as was the new king's cousin and former heir, Lord Mueller. Yet when the neighbouring kingdom threatened war, Mueller and Chime were tasked with uncovering the plot. Both were flawed, yet unwilling to accept a lesser destiny than they had once known. Could this quest be the opportunity for redemption, or would it lead them to their deaths? Big questions there from the bottom of that blurb, but yeah, I'm excited to just give it a go. I don't really know what I'm getting myself in for. If you've read any of these books that I'm talking about, please do let me know what you thought of them, because I'm going off nothing at this point. I then have 4 books currently out of the library. The first one is a comic book trade paperback, and that is Giant Days Volume 3. So again, you might have seen if you watched my reading wrap up for March that I read Giant Days Volume 1 and Volume 2, which I also borrowed from my library but have since returned, obviously, and I have now got out Volume 3. I should probably get the next volume out as well, because once you read these, you kind of just go through them really quickly, which is true of most comic books, but particularly with the tone of these, which is just very light, very fun, very cute, and very easy. So again, I just like zoomed through volumes 1 and 2 and immediately wanted to keep going. It's about a group of 3 female friends in their first year at university, and just kind of the trials and tribulations of being fresher students, basically. It's, like I said, pretty light, it can be pretty silly, but it also has that element of nostalgia for me as someone who is quite a few years past their first year of undergraduate university, but I like that aspect of it. And I don't actually read a lot of literature or comic books in this case about this age group, like in their undergraduate, in their first year of university, and if I do see it, it's often about like students at an American college, whereas for me, obviously, students at a British university is much more relatable, and for that reason, I'm just like enjoying zooming through them. They just like make me chuckle and don't have too high stakes, so what more could you possibly want? If you're interested, I'll give you a little peek at the inside, which I think completely suits the tone, like the art and the stories just match up perfectly. I then have another mass market paperback, although this one, as we know, I borrowed, and that is Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. Nnedi Okorafor is one of my favourite sort of speculative genre writers. She writes both science fiction and fantasy. This is a bit of both. It has like a sort of dystopian element to it, but there's also kind of magic, and I actually have read part of this book in the past. I listened to about the first third of this book on audiobook years ago, but I didn't really like this story in audiobook format. I really wanted to read it physically, so gave up on that audiobook. I don't know if it was also because I associated that narrator with some other stories that I'd listened to, and it was weird listening to the same person narrate the story, which was very different in tone. But whatever the reason, I've always planned to pick it up in physical copy and read it that way and experience the story that way, and then I realised that my library actually had a copy, so I thought, hey, maybe now's the time. I've actually just been reading another book by Nnedi Okorafor, so I'm back in the zone with her writing, which hopefully means I'll pick this up next. But it's quite a harrowing read. It deals very heavily with sexual violence, being mixed race, stigma, rejection by one's community. We have a protagonist whose birth was the result of a rape. Her mother was raped by this other race of people who like are in conflict with her own people, which makes her mixed raced and has kind of been ostracized from her community because of both of those things. But as she grows up, she learns she has this very powerful magic within her, and she has to learn to harness that, and during her studies she learns that someone may actually wish her physical harm and actually be trying to kill her, so that sets her on a path of discovery. And I don't know much more about it than that, because obviously I never finished reading it. I didn't even quite get to the halfway point, I don't think, but I am invested enough already in this character's storyline from what I read previously that I'm looking forward to returning to it. And like with all of Nnedi Okorafor's writing, she paints really rich, detailed and interesting speculative worlds, so I'm looking forward to also learning more about this one. We then have a book that I reserved for the library, and I'm now realising that that was probably unnecessary, because I'm pretty sure my dad would have a copy of this on his bookshelf, so when I got to visit my mum I could take his old copy, but I've got it out of the library now. And that is The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. I've never read any Ian Banks. He writes both under this name and Ian M. Banks, and Ian M. Banks, I believe, is his science fiction work, whereas the work he writes under Ian Banks is maybe more grounded in reality. I'm not sure if it's more like crime or horror or what have you. All I know is that Ian M. Banks is like the science fiction brand, and Ian Banks is the not quite so clear-cut science fiction brand. I haven't actually read any, so I'm not sure. He's a Scottish author who I've always been meaning to read, and like I said, my dad definitely has some of his books on his bookcase and always raved about him when he was still here, so it's been in the back of my mind to pick up, and this one is not as long as some of his books, and I have to say I do always lean to reading shorter books by authors first. All it has on the back here is a quote from the book, which is why I mentioned that it may be horror or crime. It reads, 2 years after I killed Blythe, I murdered my young brother, Paul, for quite different reasons than I disposed of Blythe. And then a year after that, I did for my young cousin Esmeralda, more or less on a whim. That's my score to date, 3. I haven't killed anybody for years, and I don't intend to ever again. It was just a stage I was going through. Sorry, I forgot about that. That's kind of brilliant. I mean, why would you put anything else in the back of this book when that's all you need, isn't it? Like that draws you in. Is that like the opening paragraph of the book? Because if it is, that is just perfect. It is not, but actually, I'm going to read to you the first 2 sentences because they are equally weird and intriguing. I had been making the rounds of the sacrifice poles the day we heard my brother had escaped. I already knew something was going to happen. The factory told me. Okay, now I want to read this one immediately. It's a shame I'm still like mid femme fatale because this is not a fantasy book by a female author, so I'll have to save that one. We then have one that I also am pretty sure would come under the sort of like weird speculative horror, crime, science fiction genre, whatever that is, and that is The Rift by Nina Allen, and I might have actually featured this in a library haul before now. I'm now just clicking, sitting here, holding it up. That might have happened. Sorry if it has, but I think like everybody, there are books you take out of the library and don't manage to get to before they're due back. So this is one that I'm pretty sure I have borrowed before, but then, you know, prioritised other books so didn't get to. But I am still really, really intrigued by. It's about a woman whose sister went missing many years ago and has suddenly turned up on her doorstep claiming to have been abducted by aliens. I don't know if there really was aliens, I don't know if there is a science fiction element to this, I don't even know if it's really her sister. There's so many questions to be answered on the back of that premise, and I've heard really great things about Nina Allen's writing in general, so I'm just like here for it. This is my second time borrowing it from the library, so hopefully this is the one that I get to it during. But those are the books that I have recently picked up secondhand or have out from the library at the moment. I would love to hear from you if you have read or are interested in reading any of these books. And also let me know more about your library borrowing habits. Do you always read what you borrow? Do you sometimes borrow a little bit too much than you can get to? And is there specific kinds of books that you borrow? Because I do tend towards like comic books from the library, whereas I wouldn't necessarily buy this, if that makes sense. I also think it's a fun way to try out genres that I haven't read much of in the past and kind of want to dabble my toes into. But yeah, until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys.